Whole Lotta Love, the story behind Led Zeppelin's greatest rock anthem. The late 1960s marked one of the most transformative periods in the history of popular music. Rock bands were no longer satisfied with writing simple 3-minute songs for radio play. Instead, musicians were searching for heavier sounds, greater artistic freedom, and new ways to express emotion through electric guitars, thunderous drums, and experimental production techniques. Amid this musical revolution, 4 British musicians came together to create a band that would redefine rock music for generations. That band was Led Zeppelin, and among all the songs they produced, none captured their explosive power quite like Whole Lotta Love. The story of Whole Lotta Love did not begin inside a recording studio. Instead, it started with the remarkable chemistry that existed between guitarist Jimmy Page, vocalist Robert Plant, bassist and keyboardist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham. Each member possessed extraordinary talent individually, but together they formed a musical force unlike anything audiences had experienced before. By 1969, Led Zeppelin had already attracted widespread attention with their self-titled debut album. The record introduced listeners to a heavier style of blues-inspired rock, combining raw energy with exceptional musicianship. Although critics were divided in their opinions, audiences embraced the band's aggressive sound, and concert halls quickly filled wherever they performed. Rather than celebrating their early success, the band immediately began looking ahead. They believed their next album needed to be even bolder. Jimmy Page, who served as both guitarist and producer, envisioned music that would sound larger than life. Instead of merely repeating the formula that had worked before, he wanted to push every musical boundary possible. The search for new material brought the band back to their deepest influence: American blues. For decades, blues musicians had expressed stories of love, heartbreak, desire, and survival. Artists such as Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, and countless others laid the foundation upon which rock music had been built. Led Zeppelin admired these musicians deeply and often incorporated blues traditions into their own songs. One particular composition captured the band's attention. Willie Dixon had written a song called "You Need Love," originally recorded by Muddy Waters in 1962. The song featured powerful lyrics filled with bold romantic imagery, delivered in a confident spoken style. Robert Plant found inspiration in both the emotional intensity and the rhythmic phrasing of the original blues performance. However, Led Zeppelin never intended to create a straightforward cover version. Instead, Jimmy Page developed a completely new guitar riff that transformed the song into something entirely different. The riff was simple yet unforgettable. Built around a descending pattern and played with enormous distortion, it immediately demanded attention. It became the musical heartbeat of Whole Lotta Love. Many rock historians consider this riff one of the greatest ever written. Its brilliance lay not in complexity, but in its irresistible groove. Every note seemed to pull listeners forward with unstoppable momentum. When John Bonham joined with his massive drum sound and John Paul Jones added a driving bass line, the riff evolved into an unstoppable wall of sound. Robert Plant then crafted his vocal performance around the new arrangement. His voice blended blues passion with hard rock aggression. Rather than merely singing the lyrics, he attacked each phrase with extraordinary confidence, making every line feel spontaneous and emotionally charged. As rehearsals continued, the musicians realized they were creating something far beyond an ordinary blues-inspired song. Jimmy Page believed recording technology itself could become an instrument. During sessions for the band's second album at several studios, including Olympic Studios in London, Page experimented extensively with microphone placement, echo effects, and stereo imaging. Unlike many producers of the era who sought clean, polished recordings, Page wanted listeners to feel surrounded by the music. His production philosophy focused on atmosphere as much as performance. Every instrument occupied its own space while contributing to an immense overall sound. Bonham's drums thundered through the speakers with remarkable power. Page layered guitar tracks carefully to create depth without sacrificing clarity. Jones anchored everything with steady precision, while Plant's vocals soared above the instrumental foundation. The most revolutionary section of the song emerged during the middle. Instead of continuing the traditional verse and chorus structure, the band ventured into a psychedelic soundscape unlike anything heard on mainstream rock radio at the time. The familiar rhythm suddenly disappeared. Echoes bounced across the stereo field. Electronic effects swirled unpredictably. Breathing sounds, reversed audio, distant voices, and strange sonic textures created an atmosphere that felt mysterious, surreal, and slightly unsettling. Jimmy Page achieved many of these effects using innovative studio techniques rather than expensive electronic equipment. Tape manipulation, echo chambers, and creative mixing transformed ordinary recordings into extraordinary soundscapes. For audiences in 1969, this section was astonishing. Many listeners had never experienced such experimental production inside a rock song. The musical journey felt almost cinematic, transporting audiences into an entirely different world before gradually returning to the crushing guitar riff that opened the record. The dramatic return of the main riff became one of the song's defining moments. After several minutes of sonic exploration, Bonham's drums exploded back into the mix, followed by Page's unmistakable guitar and Plant's commanding vocals. The contrast between experimentation and raw power gave the song an emotional impact few recordings could match. While the music was earning admiration, the lyrics eventually became the center of controversy. Several lines strongly resembled Willie Dixon's earlier composition, "You Need Love." Initially, Dixon did not receive songwriting credit when Led Zeppelin released Whole Lotta Love. As the song grew in popularity, questions about its lyrical origins became increasingly difficult to ignore. Eventually, legal action brought the issue to a resolution. A settlement recognized Willie Dixon's contribution, and subsequent releases credited both Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, John Bonham, and Willie Dixon as songwriters. The outcome became an important reminder of rock music's deep roots in American blues. It also encouraged broader discussions throughout the music industry regarding proper recognition for earlier blues artists whose work had profoundly influenced later generations of rock musicians. Despite the controversy, few disputed the originality of the music itself. The unforgettable riff, groundbreaking arrangement, innovative production, and explosive performance were unmistakably Led Zeppelin's own artistic achievement. When Led Zeppelin II was released in October 1969, Whole Lotta Love immediately stood out. It served as the album's opening track, announcing from its very first seconds that the band had reached an entirely new level. Listeners were instantly confronted by Page's iconic guitar riff, followed moments later by Plant's electrifying vocal entrance. The album quickly climbed charts around the world. In the United States, it reached the #1 position, replacing the Beatles' Abbey Road at the top of the Billboard album chart, a symbolic passing of the torch during one of rock music's most exciting eras. Although Led Zeppelin generally preferred focusing on albums rather than singles, Whole Lotta Love became one of the band's biggest commercial successes. Radio stations embraced the song despite its unusual structure, though some broadcasters shortened the experimental middle section for airplay. Even in edited form, the opening riff proved impossible to ignore. Concert performances elevated the song even further. On stage, Whole Lotta Love rarely remained the same from one night to the next. Instead of performing a fixed version, Led Zeppelin often expanded it into a musical journey lasting 20 minutes or more. Jimmy Page improvised extended guitar solos, John Bonham transformed simple rhythms into breathtaking displays of power and precision. John Paul Jones shifted effortlessly between bass and keyboards. Robert Plant explored new vocal melodies while interacting directly with audiences. Sometimes the band inserted brief sections of classic rock and roll songs, blues standards, or contemporary hits before returning triumphantly to the familiar closing riff. These performances demonstrated why Led Zeppelin became legendary as a live act. Their concerts were not reproductions of studio recordings. They were living, evolving musical experiences shaped by spontaneity, creativity, and the unique energy of each audience. The song also influenced countless musicians who followed. Future generations of hard rock, heavy metal, alternative rock, and even grunge artists cited Whole Lotta Love as a defining inspiration. The opening riff became a benchmark for guitar players worldwide. Its combination of simplicity, groove, and overwhelming power showed that memorable music often depended more on feel than technical complexity. Jimmy Page's production techniques inspired producers to think differently about the recording studio. Rather than simply documenting performances, producers increasingly viewed the studio as a creative environment where sounds could be manipulated to enhance storytelling and emotion. John Bonham's drum performance likewise became legendary. His enormous sound influenced generations of drummers searching for greater impact and dynamics. His playing demonstrated that power and groove could coexist beautifully, creating rhythms that remained both technically impressive and emotionally compelling. Robert Plant's vocal performance also helped redefine the role of the rock singer. Instead of restrained delivery, he embraced theatrical intensity, blending blues tradition with unmatched vocal range. His style became one of the defining characteristics of hard rock throughout the 1970s. John Paul Jones, though often less publicly celebrated than his bandmates, provided the sophisticated musical foundation that held everything together. His bass lines gave the song movement without unnecessary complexity, allowing the guitar and vocals to dominate while maintaining remarkable balance. Decades after its release, Whole Lotta Love continued appearing in films, television programs, sporting events, documentaries, and advertising campaigns. Its opening riff became instantly recognizable even to people unfamiliar with Led Zeppelin's complete catalog. Music critics consistently ranked the song among the greatest rock recordings ever made. It appeared on numerous lists celebrating the finest guitar riffs, greatest rock songs, and most influential recordings of the 20th century. Perhaps its greatest achievement, however, lay in how naturally it blended multiple musical worlds. At its heart remained the spirit of American blues. Wrapped around that foundation was the explosive energy of British hard rock. Added to both was the fearless experimentation of late 1960s psychedelic music. The result sounded both familiar and revolutionary. More than half a century later, the recording still feels fresh because it refuses to follow predictable rules. Every element, the unforgettable riff, Bonham's thunderous drumming, Plant's electrifying vocals, Jones's steady musicianship, and Page's visionary production, works together in perfect balance. Whole Lotta Love was more than a hit song. It was a declaration. It announced that Led Zeppelin had no intention of remaining confined by musical conventions. They would borrow from history, honor their influences, experiment without fear, and create music powerful enough to shape the future of rock itself. That philosophy defined not only the song, but the band's entire legacy. For millions of listeners across generations, the first notes of Whole Lotta Love still deliver the same thrill they did in 1969, a reminder that sometimes a single guitar riff can change the sound of popular music forever.